The Galactic Evaluation Protocol had been refining species for membership consideration for approximately 4,000 standard cycles, which sounds impressive until you realize that's how long it takes most bureaucracies to agree on lunch arrangements. The testing facility aboard Station Omega-7 floated in the neutral zone between 12 different stellar territories, specifically chosen because it was the one place in the galaxy where nobody wanted to start a war, mostly because the food court was terrible and the parking was worse. The GEP prided itself on objective assessment of species readiness for interstellar community membership. They tested everything: technological advancement, social cohesion, conflict resolution, and most importantly, individual self-sufficiency. Because apparently nothing says ready for the cosmic stage quite like proving you can survive alone on a rock with minimal resources. The logic was straightforward enough. If an individual couldn't maintain themselves in isolation, how could their species handle the isolation of deep space? It made sense in committee meetings, which should have been the first warning sign. Evaluator Clickstar, a crystalline being whose species had passed this very test 11,000 cycles ago by building a modest shelter and lasting 30 days, stood before the observation screens with 3 of his colleagues. His facets gleamed with what might have been smugness, though crystalline expressions were notoriously difficult to read. Beside him stood Observer Thren, a quadrupedal creature covered in sensory tendrils that currently quivered with boredom, and Assessment Coordinator Vix, whose species communicated primarily through color shifts and exasperated sighs, a perfect evolutionary adaptation for bureaucratic work. Another human, Clickstar noted, his voice resonating through his crystal lattice structure with the tone of someone announcing a persistent fungal infection. The application species from Sol 3, bipedal, soft-bodied, no natural defenses worth mentioning. This should be refreshingly brief. Humans had recently achieved faster-than-light capability through what could only be described as weaponized stubbornness and an alarming disregard for safety protocols. They'd applied for GEP evaluation within 6 months of their first contact with alien life, which most species considered either admirably confident or concerningly delusional. The betting pools on Station Omega-7 leaned toward the latter. The test parameters were simple, unchanged for millennia, because if something isn't broken, why fix it? And if it is broken, why admit it? 1 candidate, 1 uninhabited planet sector, 30 days to demonstrate self-sufficiency. They received basic survival supplies, a multi-tool, water purification tablets, emergency rations for 5 days, and a beacon for extraction if things went catastrophically wrong. Most species built a shelter, foraged for food, maintained a fire, and counted down the days until retrieval. The Zenth had famously meditated for 29 days straight. The Prolaxians had built an elegant geodesic dome. The hive-minded Krell had spent the entire month arguing with themselves about proper shelter orientation. "Computer, is this normal?" Vix asked, color shifting to confused purple. "Negative. Subjects typically construct one shelter and focus on food acquisition and security." "Perhaps it's a cultural practice," Thren suggested. "Some species build multiple structures for different functions. For one individual." Clickstar's facets reflected skepticism. "Inefficient." By day 7, the observation team had stopped pretending to work on other evaluations. Rosco had constructed 9 buildings, 9 arranged in a neat circle around what could only be described as a village square. But it got better, or worse, depending on your perspective and definition of sanity. The human had built roads, actual roads, packed earth pathways connecting each structure to the central plaza, with smaller paths branching off toward the water source and foraging areas. Rosco had even placed flat rocks at intervals along the main paths, creating what appeared to be primitive street markers. "This is highly irregular," Klexthar stated, which was crystalline speak for "what the hell." "The human is exceeding self-sufficiency parameters," the AI confirmed. "Constructing infrastructure for a population of 1. Check the beacon," Vix ordered, flashing worried yellow. "Maybe they're trying to signal for extraction and we're misinterpreting." The beacon sat untouched in Roscoe's original shelter, covered with a carefully woven basket. Day 14 brought irrigation. Actual irrigation channels, hand-dug from the water source to organized crop plots, where the human had planted seeds harvested from local vegetation. The plots were arranged in tidy rows, each marked with small signs made from bark and charcoal. The signs read things like root vegetables and leafy greens in human standard script. "They're farming," Thren whispered, tendrils hanging limp with shock. "They're supposed to be surviving. They're farming." "And what is that?" Klexthar pointed at the screen where Rosco was constructing what appeared to be a water wheel in the stream. "I believe," the AI said slowly, "that's a primitive hydroelectric generator, or possibly a mill. Analysis is difficult." By day 18, the village had a town square with a well, even though the stream was right there. Rosco had built the well anyway, lining it with stones and constructing a small roof structure over it. The human had also created what appeared to be a waste management system, latrine trenches properly positioned downhill from water sources, covered and marked. The observation team had called in additional evaluators. 7 alien species representatives now crowded the monitoring room, watching in collective disbelief. "Is this allowed?" someone asked. "There's nothing in the protocols about it," Vix admitted, now cycling through colors so rapidly they looked like a distress beacon. "The rules say demonstrate self-sufficiency for 30 days. Technically, the human is self-sufficient. They're building a civilization," Klexthar protested. "A civilization of 1, Thren corrected. Day 21 was when Rosco opened the market. The human had spent 3 days constructing stall structures in the town square, wooden frames with fabric coverings made from woven plant fibers. Each stall was labeled with carefully painted signs: bakery, tool shop, general store, fish market, and inexplicably, visitor information. But here's where it transcended from impressive to concerning. Rosco had stocked the stalls. The bakery contained clay pots of ground grain and primitive bread. The tool shop held various carved implements, knives, hammers, digging sticks, each hanging from display hooks. The general store had baskets of dried fish, preserved vegetables, and what appeared to be soap made from animal fat and ash. Then the human did something that made half the observation team question their own sanity. Rosco walked to the bakery stall, examined the bread, and placed a small polished stone on the counter. Then the human walked around to the other side of the stall, picked up the stone, placed it in a basket labeled payment, and took a piece of bread. The human had created currency and was trading with themselves. "Emergency evaluation meeting," Klexthar announced. Now, the testing board convened in conference room 7, which had an excellent view of the station's docking bay and a terrible coffee synthesizer. 12 evaluators from different species sat, stood, hovered, or otherwise positioned themselves around the central holo display showing Roscoe's village in real time. "The question before this board," Klexthar began, "is whether test subject RF 7743 has passed, failed, or somehow broken the self-sufficiency evaluation. They're clearly self-sufficient, argued Prell, a gaseous being whose voice wheezed through a translation device. They've created food sources, shelter, tools, everything needed for survival. They've created an economy with one participant, countered Vix. That's not self-sufficiency, that's a psychotic break. Is it though? Thren's tendrils waved thoughtfully. Review the footage. The human hasn't shown any signs of distress. No talking to imaginary entities, no erratic behavior, just methodical construction and organization. The hollow display showed Rosco holding what appeared to be a grand opening ceremony for the market. The human had made a ribbon from plant fibers, stretched it across the entrance to the square, and cut it with a stone knife. Then Rosco applauded. Alone, the human was giving themselves a standing ovation. The psychological profile is concerning, an insectoid evaluator clicked. No species functions optimally in complete isolation. Humans are a social species, another added. This behavior suggests severe loneliness coping mechanisms, or, suggested the Hive Krell representative, all 17 of them speaking in unison, the human understands something we don't. Day 28 brought the inspection tour. Rosco walked through the village with a piece of bark and a charcoal stick, making marks and notes. The human checked each building, tested the structural integrity, examined the crop irrigation, and sampled products from each market stall. Then Rosco sat in the town square and appeared to calculate something, making marks in the dirt with intense concentration. The observation room had become a full-time human watching facility. Personnel from across the station dropped by during breaks to see what the crazy biped was doing now. Some brought snacks. A betting pool had formed about what Rosco would build next. Temple was the current favorite, followed by prison and theme park. Day 29, Rosco rested. The human walked through the village slowly, sat by the stream, ate a meal of bread and dried fish, and watched the sunset. For the first time in nearly a month, the subject looked tired, but also satisfied. The expression reminded Clickstar of the look his offspring got after completing a particularly complex crystal growth project, pride mixed with exhaustion. Day 30 arrived with standard extraction protocol. The transport beam activated at precisely 0800 hours, and Rosco materialized in the receiving bay of Station Omega-7, still wearing the dirt-stained jumpsuit, still carrying that same unsettling smile. The evaluation interview room was deliberately neutral, white walls, comfortable seating, calming lights. Rosco sat across from the evaluation panel of 5, looking considerably more cleaned up, but no less cheerful. Test subject, RF 7743. Clickstar began formally. You have completed the 30-day self-sufficiency evaluation. However, your approach was unconventional. Can you explain your methodology? Rosco leaned back, still smiling. You asked me to demonstrate self-sufficiency for 30 days. I did. You built a village, Vic stated, currently locked on orange with confusion. For yourself, alone. I built infrastructure. Rosco corrected. Self-sufficiency isn't just surviving 30 days. It's creating systems that could sustain survival indefinitely. Anyone can huddle in a shelter and ration supplies. That's not sufficiency, that's endurance. Thren's tendrils perked up. Continue. Look, Rosco said, leaning forward. I researched your test before I came. Every species does the same thing. Minimal shelter, basic food acquisition, count down the days. But self-sufficiency means supporting yourself without external aid, long term. If I'm stuck on that planet for 30 days or 30 years, I need more than a lean-to and luck. So you built a village, Clickstar repeated, uncertain whether he was impressed or concerned. I built scalable systems, Rosco emphasized. Multiple shelters mean redundancy if one fails. Roads optimize resource gathering. Irrigation ensures consistent food production. The market, here the human's smile widened. The market was probably overkill, I'll admit. But organizational systems matter. Inventory management, resource allocation, even the currency experiment. I was testing whether I could maintain complex society-level thinking in isolation. You were trading with yourself, Vic said flatly. I was practicing trade protocols, Rosco countered. If other humans arrived, or if I encountered native species, I'd need functional exchange systems. Plus, honestly, it kept me mentally sharp. Loneliness is the real threat in isolation. Staying busy, staying organized, maintaining purpose, that's self-sufficiency for a social species. The room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of station life support. You knew, Thren said slowly, that the test was about surviving 30 days alone, and you decided to over-engineer the solution. I decided to solve the actual problem, Rosco replied. You test self-sufficiency to predict deep space capability, right? Space travel means isolation, limited resources, improvisation. Building a village demonstrates all of those better than building a campsite. Plus, and here the human's grin became absolutely infuriating, you said self-sufficient, not survive alone miserably. I was sufficient, and I had a village. That's a bonus. Clickstar felt something he rarely experienced, the crystalline equivalent of a headache. You're telling this panel that constructing an entire settlement, complete with marketplace and currency system, alone, was a practical joke. Not a joke, Rosco said seriously. A demonstration. Humans over-prepare. It's our thing. You give us a problem. We don't just solve it. We solve it so thoroughly that the problem feels bad about itself. You wanted self-sufficiency. I gave you a functioning colonial foundation. The market stalls could support 12 vendors, Rosco interrupted. The irrigation system can expand to triple current crop production. The shelters are designed for different purposes: storage, sleeping, workshop, communal gathering. I built for a future population because that's what self-sufficiency means to humans. We don't just survive. We thrive, we expand, and we definitely overbuild. Preln wheezed something that might have been laughter. The human outthought the test. The human, Vix corrected, flashing amused green, took self-sufficient literally to an absurd extreme. The evaluation panel conferred for 17 minutes, which turned into an hour-long debate, which evolved into a 3-hour philosophical discussion about the nature of self-sufficiency, the definition of adequate response, and whether humans were brilliant or insane. The conclusion, as with most committee decisions, satisfied no one completely. Clickstar returned to the interview room, where Rosco had been patiently waiting, apparently practicing some kind of meditation, or possibly sleeping with eyes open. Humans were weird. Test subject RF 7743, the crystalline evaluator announced. The Galactic Evaluation Protocol has reached a decision. You have passed the self-sufficiency evaluation with notation of excessive competency with concerning psychological implications. Your species application will proceed to the next phase. Rosco stood, nodded politely, and turned to leave. One question, Clickstar called out. The market, the trading with yourself. Were you actually that lonely, or was it truly just practice? The human paused, looking back with that infuriating smile. Evaluator. Humans once had a man stranded alone for years who befriended a volleyball. I built a functioning economy. I think I coped remarkably well. As Rosco left, Thren's tendrils quivered with what might have been respect. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or terrified of their species. Both, Vix suggested, flashing resigned purple. Definitely both. Later in the station bar where evaluators gathered to question their career choices, Clixthar reviewed the final footage of Roscoe's village. The structures stood empty but solid, the market stalls awaiting vendors that would never come, the roads leading nowhere in particular. It looked simultaneously hopeful and absurd, a monument to human over-preparation built by one person who refused to accept that survival meant merely surviving. You know what's really concerning? Preln wheezed over drinks. The human was right. If we dropped a colony there tomorrow, they'd have immediate infrastructure. Rosco built a better foundation in 30 days alone than most species build with full teams. Clixthar's facets dimmed thoughtfully. The test had been unchanged for 4,000 cycles specifically because it worked, because it was standardized, because everyone approached it the same way. Leave it to humans to show up, ignore thousands of years of precedent, and build a village because apparently adequate wasn't in their vocabulary. The Galactic Evaluation Protocol would eventually accept humanity for membership, though they'd add a footnote to human files. Species demonstrates excessive initiative, supervise closely. Do not give open-ended instructions. It wouldn't help. Humans didn't follow instructions so much as use them as starting suggestions. Somewhere on that test planet, Roscoe's village stood empty, a testament to the simple truth that when you ask a human to be self-sufficient, you should probably specify exactly how sufficient, or they'll build you a functioning municipality just to prove a point. And they'll smile while doing it, which somehow made it worse. The galaxy, Clixthar reflected, was about to get significantly more complicated, but at least it wouldn't be boring. He really hoped they had good insurance.